Hello, Mr. Cropper et al. First of all, I would not discourage or berate the people sending you money. I applaud them, and I agree fully with your argument about educating other people's children. And if they're being educated in a way you can endorse, then that is working to fulfill your own values, and that is worthwhile. Um, but see, also, I'm a progressive. I'm somewhat libertarian as well, but I'm progressive. So, I mean, I have a lot of access to various thinking that we ought to educate each other's children. That I can't call it a direct benefit, but it's direct enough, because yes, I want to live in a society. The same thing with the roads, I want to have the roads. We get into a problem in this situation where it's a benefit, say, to a lot of people to have roads or a school that they agree with the principles taught in that school, and only a few pay. But but I'm willing to be in that situation, and I think that's great, and I'm really glad to hear you as an objectivist make such a justification for a social service and the idea that it is a benefit to educate other people's children because you need educated people to have a decent society. And so I would encourage people to do that. I'm hesitant because your values are different enough for me that it might be just sentimentality on my part. Um, you're not I'm not really sure what kind of values you are, but I do think that kids are pretty resilient. And if you teach them enough of more or less the common knowledge of things and the facts and evidence that have been collected, that it'll probably turn out to be a better education than they'll get in public schools, no matter what. And I mean, I'm pausing because there's a possibility of indoctrinating them into certain political ideas. But I think kids are pretty resilient to that, and really, if you give them enough information, even if graduated a disproportionate number of people of a particular ideology that they might not have had they not gone to your school, that I don't know. I think that's likely outweighed if you teach them the actual practical reality of how to read and learn from history books. You do some of that, how to figure out mathematical and logical problems, and you do some of that. And all that practical knowledge outweighs pretty much most ideological bias within limits. The thing is, so I approve of all that. The thing is, I don't believe in altruism. But I don't mean that I don't believe in altruistic actions, actions called altruistic. Um, I wholeheartedly support them. It's just that I don't believe those actions are altruistic. I think that they're self interested, exactly in the way you have described. I believe that, it's self interest that I fund a national highway system because I want to live in a nation where free travel is possible. I don't just need a road between the two or three towns I live in. I want the people in Chicago and Cincinnati to have roads to go between their cities as well. It's the concept of altruism that I don't appreciate because it implies that giving to others is selfless. And I think it's practically never selfless. Um, Either you see the practical benefit, for example, you see that having educated children is a good idea, that will make for a better country for your own children and even yourself to live in. Or you see, that it's supporting your values, which is just an indirect, way of collecting evidence for the same sort of indirect, the same sort of benefit, right? That your values are being promoted is a similar way of saying that there's going to be an education and people will, you know, be educated in a way that benefits you, because it'll help make a culture where your ideals can survive and are welcome, or whatever. So I yeah, I'm not begrudging at all. I think the people in those comments, they're telling you to get other jobs and stuff, they're way out of line. Um, they Perhaps they don't believe in uh, social cooperation. Perhaps they don't believe in that we're all building one society. I do, so I think it's great. I think it's great. You're starting a school. I think it's great that people that are of like mind will support it. And I don't think anybody should be condemned for it. I was just eager to hear an objectivist explain why educating other people's children at great distances from yourself is a good idea. I like to hear an objectivist describe why something traditionally thought of as altruistic is really in their self-interest. Because ultimately, I think, if you take an objectivist type of philosophy and you apply that kind of thinking to it, you end up building social systems uh, much like I want built. The key comes down, of course, this voluntary so-called altruism. Um, but it's an important distinction, because I've heard many objectivists uh, criticize voluntary altruism, um, and not make the arguments that the altruism was really in our self-interest, but argue that it really was not a good idea. That it was not a good idea to create the social safety net, or to educate people's children that can't afford it. They call it altruistic, they ask like it's altruistic, and then say don't do it. So I'm very glad to hear a description of you where you're doing something very giving of your time, even though you're being paid. I think, the service of education is a big service compared to how much you're being paid now, or even if you had a very, full, you know, full roster of students and we're making, a full-time teaching wage from it. Still be very giving of you in my book. And so certainly it's also giving of anybody that wants to contribute to see their values, or to see there be better education in the world. Um, I think it's somewhat giving of them as well. But it is ultimately in their self-interest. And, we have the whole issue of how to make this sufficiently voluntary in all cases. But basically, this is why I support an educational system. I do support more of a charter type system where schools such as yours can, get charters and compete with other schools for giving public education, but where it would be public, so that everybody's children can afford to go no matter what. But it could be privately provided. I assume the charter system for schools. And so it doesn't mean I want a centralized system, in the terms of education. It's like I like having an interstate highway system. It's not really centralized because mostly it goes through the states. Even the federal money is often given to the states and spent by the states. So it's a distributed system even there, but it achieves this global access. You see, I want to live in a country where I can travel from coast to coast. I want free travel. So I don't want to have to pay somebody. I don't want them to have the rights of a private property owner where even if I can pay them, they can refuse me passage. I want to be able to know that I can go from New York to California by road. I want to be able, or, and walk if I have to. I want to know that. So it's not altruistic, um, and I appreciate hearing an objectivist rather explanation of why this sort of thing is in someone's self-interest. So thank you very much for that, and I encourage people of like mind to you to contribute to your school.